He called her his daughter, every single day of her life. But then he passed and his will declared she didn't exist. What they hadn't anticipated was the undeniable proof he'd left behind. Janelle Brooks barely stepped inside the church before the first sharp pang hit her. Not a physical blow or a harsh word, but the profound silence. That kind of hush that lingers a beat too long when an uninvited presence enters. Heads turned, then quickly averted. Some offered polite nods, while others acted as if she were invisible. She cinched the belt of her navy blue coat, moving towards the front pew where the casket rested, adorned with white lilies and a photograph of her father, Harold Brooks, a retired math teacher known throughout Florence, South Carolina, as the gentle man with the quiet smile. Janelle hadn't seen some of these faces in over a decade, perhaps more. But Harold had raised her as his own since she was 9. That had to count for something, at least it used to. She settled beside her Aunt Greta, who offered a strange smile and a clipped, "Hey." No embrace, no warmth. Janelle stared straight ahead, her chest aching. It wasn't just the grief. It was this persistent feeling of being an outsider, merely tolerated. She tried to shrug it off. Funerals made people strange. The service began. The pastor spoke softly, sharing anecdotes of Harold's generosity and kindness. Janelle held herself together until his favorite Sam Cooke song played. That's when she fractured. A few tears escaped, her face angled downwards. Afterward, the family gathered in the church basement for a modest reception. Fried chicken, macaroni, pound cake, all the familiar comforts. Janelle took a paper plate and retreated to a corner by the drinks, needing a moment to compose herself. Then he appeared, Conrad Elgin, the man she hadn't seen in years. Same slicked back hair, same calculated smile. The longtime family lawyer who'd managed Harold's legal affairs even before Janelle moved in. "Janelle," he said, tilting his head. "You've blossomed into quite the woman. Heard you're doing excellent work in Charlotte." She managed a tight smile. "Trying my best, thank you." He lowered his voice. "Listen, I wanted a quick private word with you. It's about the will." That phrase alone sent her stomach plummeting. She followed him down a narrow corridor into a small office, away from the chatter and clinking cutlery. Conrad gently closed the door behind them. "I won't keep you long," he stated, "but I felt it best to be upfront before the reading. There's no easy way to say this." He sat, fingers steepled as if preparing for a delicate operation. "Your name doesn't appear in Harold's will." Janelle frowned. "What?" "It seems, legally speaking, your adoption was never finalized. I've thoroughly checked everything. No court record, no completed paperwork. So as it stands, you're not recognized as a legal heir." The air stilled. Janelle stared at him, blinking slowly, her mind struggling to process. She let out a single disbelieving laugh. "That makes no sense. I lived with him since I was a child. He raised me. He called me his daughter every single day." "I'm not saying he didn't love you," Conrad quickly interjected, "but legally I can only go by what's on paper. And right now that paper doesn't include you. So you're telling me my father, the man who paid for my college, took me to every doctor's appointment, taught me to change my car oil, just forgot to make it official?" "I'm sorry," Conrad said, his voice laced with feigned sympathy, "but it happens more often than you think." She gazed at him, her mouth opening then closing. Her father was meticulous, always. He didn't forget things like that. And he never treated her like an afterthought. Janelle's voice dropped. "Did my cousins know about this?" Conrad hesitated. That was all the answer she needed. Her breath grew shallow, a lump forming in her throat. But she swallowed it down. "Not here. Not in front of him." "Thanks for the update," she said coldly, turning for the door. His voice pursued her. "I'm truly sorry." She didn't reply as she stepped back into the fluorescent-lit hallway. Something shifted within her. Grief receded and suspicion took the reins. She couldn't shake the feeling that Conrad wasn't being entirely truthful, and that something about this will was amiss. By the time Janelle reached her rental car, her hands were trembling. She sat in the driver's seat, keys in her lap, staring through the windshield as if she could somehow rewind the last 15 minutes. The man who'd once sent her birthday card signed Uncle Conrad had just severed her from her own father's legacy with a few chilling sentences. She didn't cry, not yet. Her face was too hot for tears. She started the engine and drove to the house she used to call home. It was a modest two-story residence on Mayflower Drive. White shutters, rusted mailbox, the same crack in the driveway since she was 12. But now it felt alien, as if it had already begun to forget her. Inside it smelled of lemon polish and dust. Some furniture had been rearranged. Her cousin Melanie, Harold's niece, was already staying there, acting as if she owned the place. Melanie barely glanced up from her phone when Janelle entered. "Heard you talk to Conrad," she said, her tone flat. "That's rough." Janelle dropped her bag by the stairs. "You knew." Melanie shrugged. "It's not like it was a secret. Daddy told me a while ago that Uncle Harold never filed the final paperwork." "That's a lie." Janelle shot back. "He showed me the adoption certificate himself. It used to hang right here." She pointed toward the hallway next to the mirror. "Where is it?" Melanie looked over lazily. "Girl, that thing was just for show. You really thought that meant something?" Janelle's throat tightened. She turned and walked down the hallway. The frame was gone. The wall looked freshly patched. Her fingers traced the drywall and her heart began to pound. He turned to Melanie. "Why would you take it down?" Melanie stood now, finally looking serious. "Why are you digging around?" "He's gone, Janelle. There's nothing to fight over." Janelle took a step forward. "You're scared I'll find something." Melanie crossed her arms. "You think just because he loved you that means you get something? That's not how this works. Blood talks. Harold never cared about blood." Janelle snapped. "He chose me. You were barely around." Silence. Just the distant hum of the fridge in the kitchen. Melanie finally muttered, "Doesn't matter now." Janelle stormed upstairs to her old bedroom. It had been converted into a sewing room, the bed replaced by a folding table covered in fabric scraps and tangled threads. But one thing remained, an old cedar chest in the corner. She opened it. Inside were photo albums, cards, some books. She pulled one out, Charlotte's Web, with her name scribbled on the inside cover in Harold's handwriting. "To my daughter. Forever, Dad." Her fingers trembled as she flipped through the pages. Tucked between the last chapter was a yellowing envelope. She opened it. Inside was a letter dated March 7, 1999. "To Janelle, if I ever forget to say it out loud, you are my daughter always. I may not have given you life, but loving you has been the most natural thing I've ever done. Love, Dad." He had to sit down. This wasn't just affection. It was intention. Harold meant for her to be his family. Every action, every letter, every morning packed with school lunches. Proof. So why was Conrad lying? And why was the document missing? Janelle sat there until the light outside the window began to fade. The house had never felt so strange, as if someone had erased parts of her existence and hoped she wouldn't notice. But she wasn't going to let that happen. He grabbed the letter, the book, and the album. Then as she stood to leave the room, her phone buzzed. One new voicemail. It was from Harold 2 days before he died. She pressed play. His voice was tired but still carried that slow warmth. "Hey baby girl, just wanted to say I'm proud of you. There's a lot I wish I had more time to explain, but if anything happens, check the old truck. There's a key taped under the glove box. You'll know what it's for when you find it. Love you." Janelle stared at the screen. That truck had been sitting in the backyard for months, but now she had a reason to check it, and a fire within her that wouldn't stop until she knew the truth. The sun was barely up when Janelle slipped on her sneakers and headed out back. Harold's old Ford sat under the pecan tree, covered in pollen and a thin film of grime. The tires were low, the windows streaked, but it looked just like it had every morning he'd driven her to school. She opened the driver's door. It groaned from rust but held steady. She reached under the glove box, her fingers searching the hard plastic, grazing a metal screw, then a strip of duct tape. Her heart skipped. She peeled it back carefully and felt a small metal object drop into her palm. A key, worn but unmistakably marked with the name of a local bank, People's South in Sumter, about 40 minutes away. She closed the door gently and stood for a second, staring at the key. Harold didn't make promises he couldn't keep, and he certainly didn't leave keys lying around for no reason. She left a note for Melanie on the kitchen counter. "Taking care of something Dad asked me to do. Don't call unless it's urgent." She hit the road with the letter, the children's book, and the photo album beside her. The drive to Sumter was quiet, the kind of quiet that forced your thoughts to get loud. She kept thinking about what Conrad had said. No legal record, no court paperwork. But if Harold had made a trip to a bank and left a key behind, it meant he knew something needed protecting, something worth hiding from people like Conrad or Melanie. At People's South, the lobby smelled of old carpet and copier toner. A small bell chimed when she walked in. The woman behind the counter looked up from her computer. "Good morning." Janelle slid the key forward. "I think my father kept a safe deposit box here." Harold Brooks. The teller checked a ledger, then motioned to a nearby door. "One moment, let me have our branch manager help you." 5 minutes later, a gray-haired man in a brown cardigan came out. "Miss Brooks, I'm Mr. Aldridge. You're listed as the authorized co-signer." Janelle blinked. "I am." He nodded. "Your name is on the signature card. It was added about 5 years ago." Her chest tightened. "Can I see it?" He led her into a small room with a table and a locked wall of boxes. After checking her ID and having her sign a few forms, he brought out a long silver box and placed it gently on the table. "I'll give you a moment," he said, closing the door behind him. Janelle stared at the box for a beat, then opened it. The first thing she saw was a folded document labeled, "Adoption Finalization, Mecklenburg County." She unfolded it with trembling hands. There it was, dated, stamped, signed by a judge, March 12, 2000. Her adoption had been finalized a full 25 years ago. Underneath it was a letter addressed, to be opened only by Janelle Brooks. She opened that too. "Janelle, if you're reading this, it means something's gone wrong. I didn't trust Conrad anymore. Too many whispers in the family, too many things going missing around the house. I wanted to make sure you had proof of who you are and what you mean to me. This adoption is real. You are mine in every way that counts and in every way that matters to the law. Take this and stand tall. Love you always, Dad." She covered her mouth with her hand. At the bottom of the box was a copy of a revised will. In it, Janelle was listed as the primary beneficiary. The house, the savings, the land behind the house. All of it was meant for her. She sank into the chair. He had protected her even when people around him tried to rewrite the truth. She sat there for a full minute, breathing slow, steady breaths. Her whole body buzzed with disbelief and gratitude and something sharper underneath, rage. They had lied, looked her in the face and tried to erase her. But now she had the proof, legal, personal, undeniable. She carefully returned everything to the box, took the adoption papers and placed the revised will in a separate envelope. As she stepped back into the bright lobby, Mr. Aldridge gave her a kind smile. "Everything okay?" Janelle gave a tight nod. "Yes. Everything's finally clear." But clarity was only the beginning. Now it was time to confront the man who tried to erase her like she was never part of the family. By the time Janelle pulled into the driveway back in Florence, her jaw was set. She'd driven the whole way in silence, not even the radio to break the stillness. Everything she needed to prove who she was sat in the folder on the passenger seat. Harold's letter, the final adoption paperwork, and the updated will, not copies, originals. She sat there for a minute, staring at the house. Melanie's car was gone. Good. She walked inside, went straight to the kitchen and poured herself a glass of water. Her fingers trembled around the glass. Her thoughts kept jumping ahead to what needed to happen next, who to call, what to file. But before any of that, she needed to confront Conrad Elgin. The man had looked her in the face and lied, no hesitation, no regret. And now she had proof he'd done it knowingly. She took out her phone and dialed his office. His assistant picked up. "Elgin Law, this is Pamela." "Hi Pamela, this is Janelle Brooks. I need to see Mr. Elgin immediately." I'm not sure he's in the office. Tell him I've got my father's real will and the finalized adoption papers. If he wants to keep his license, he'll meet me today." A long pause. "I'll call him now. Can I have him meet you somewhere?" "Courthouse front steps." 1 hour. She hung up. Exactly 57 minutes later, Janelle stood outside the Florence County Courthouse in a dark sweater and jeans, folder pressed to her chest. A silver Mercedes pulled up to the curb. Conrad stepped out, adjusting his cuffs as if nothing was amiss. He spotted her, gave a tight smile and walked over. "Janelle, quite the dramatic location." "You lied to me," she said flatly. "You said there was no finalized adoption, that I wasn't in the will." He raised an eyebrow and she opened the folder, handing him the documents one by one. The court-stamped adoption order, the updated will listing her as beneficiary, her name in ink, signed by Harold Brooks. Conrad scanned the papers in silence. His smile dropped. This is unexpected. No, she said. What's unexpected is you thinking I wouldn't look for the truth. Did you think I'd just cry and leave? I gave you the version I had access to, he said slowly, cautiously. Maybe Harold forgot to give me this version, or maybe, no. My father didn't forget. You did this on purpose. Conrad's face changed just for a second, a twitch, a flicker, then calm again. You're making serious accusations. I have serious proof, she snapped. You didn't just overlook something, you buried it. And you tried to benefit from it. My cousins told me everything. You were helping them get everything by cutting me out. That's not true. Want to keep talking? I'm recording. She tapped her phone in her pocket. A little bluff, but it worked. Conrad stepped back slightly. His voice lowered. You don't want to get lawyers involved in this. Oh, but I do. In fact, I'm already speaking to one. So unless you want your entire practice dragged into court, I suggest you step aside and fast. He looked at her, really looked at her for the first time that day. Then he reached up and rubbed his forehead. You always were like him. Stubborn. Wrong, she said. I'm worse. Because I remember everything. Every letter, every ride to school, every bedtime story. He didn't raise me halfway. He didn't keep me for show. He was my dad, and I'm not letting anyone erase that. Conrad didn't answer. She turned and started walking toward the clerk's office. I'll have to verify the documents, he called out behind her. Do it, she said over her shoulder, and be quick about it. But even as she said it, Janelle knew this wasn't just about legality anymore. It was about reclaiming her place in a family that tried to push her out. It didn't take long. 3 days after Janelle submitted the documents to the probate clerk, everything began unraveling, not for her but for Conrad and her cousins. The clerk confirmed the will was legitimate, dated, witnessed, notarized, stamped with Harold Brooks' signature and the bank's official seal. The adoption paperwork had been finalized 2.5 decades ago, no question. And the most damning part, a discrepancy in the chain of custody. The previous version of the will, the one Conrad had presented as the official version, was missing 2 critical signatures that made it invalid. It looked like Conrad had known that, and yet he pushed it anyway. That afternoon, Janelle's new attorney, Miss Regina Langford out of Charleston, filed a motion to formally contest the will Conrad submitted. She moved fast. Regina didn't talk much, but she was sharp, direct, and calm in a way that made you feel like nothing was going to slip through her fingers. Janelle didn't go to Conrad's office again. She didn't have to. Instead, Regina arranged a face-to-face meeting with Conrad, Melanie, and the rest of the family who had stood to gain from the deception. It was held in a small conference room at the probate court. Janelle sat at the end of the table, folder in front of her, hands clasped tightly. Conrad sat on the left, Melanie and her brother Troy on the right. Regina stood. I think we all understand why we're here, she began, her voice as steady as stone. We've reviewed the documentation Mr. Brooks left behind. There is no ambiguity. Miss Janelle Brooks is the legal adopted daughter of the deceased. She is the rightful heir under the most recent valid will. Conrad didn't speak. Melanie rolled her eyes. So what now? She gets everything. She gets what Harold intended for her to have, Regina replied. That includes the house, the savings account, the land parcel, and the life insurance benefits. You think she deserves that? Troy muttered. She wasn't even blood. Janelle sat up straighter. Your uncle raised me. That house, that land, you walked past it every summer, but you never lifted a finger to help him mow it. You visited once every couple of years. I was there every day, every night. I watched his knees give out. I was the one who made sure his meds were filled. Where were you? Neither of them responded. Conrad finally spoke. Harold never gave me this updated version of the will. If he had, none of this would have happened. Janelle didn't even blink. That's a lie. You were the one who notarized it. Regina slid a printed scan across the table. Signature match confirmed. Mr. Elgin notarized the revised will 4 months before Harold's death. Silence. The truth hit the room like a stone dropped in water. Troy shifted in his chair, looking everywhere but at Janelle. Melanie crossed her arms and stared at the table. Conrad slowly folded his hands in his lap. You tried to erase me, Janelle said quietly, but he made sure I'd be protected. He knew what you were capable of. Melanie muttered something under her breath, but no one cared anymore. The weight had shifted. Conrad stood. I'll cooperate with whatever's required for the transition of assets. You'll also be reporting this to the state bar, Regina added, handing him a separate form. We'll be filing a formal complaint. You withheld a valid will and misrepresented a client's final wishes. That's malpractice at minimum. He took the form with a stiff nod, no fight left in him. Janelle stood slowly, her eyes never leaving his. You knew I was his daughter. You just didn't want me to matter. And with that she walked out. But she didn't feel triumphant, only steady. Because the truth had done what she couldn't alone. It made them see her for who she always was. It took 6 more weeks for the paperwork to clear, but when the final court order came through, Janelle just sat at her kitchen table staring at it. Her name printed clean and bold at the top. Janelle Dominique Brooks, sole beneficiary of the estate of Harold Ernest Brooks. The words felt heavy not because of the money or the house or the land, but because they made something real that people had tried to erase. She folded the letter, slid it into a folder and exhaled. Outside the window, the late spring wind pushed through the trees in the backyard. The old oak Harold used to tie a tire swing to was still there, strong as ever. That morning Melanie had called. It was short, no apologies, just a clipped question about whether she could pick up a few things she'd left in the attic. Janelle told her she could come by Saturday. Someone would be there to let her in, but it wouldn't be Janelle. She didn't need to see her again. The house was hers now, but it didn't feel like a prize, more like a journal she hadn't opened in years, filled with memories she needed time to read through. She started small, took down some of the old curtains, repainted the hallway where the adoption certificate used to hang. She put it back up, this time in a new frame with a spotlight above it, right next to Harold's photo from his retirement ceremony. She wanted it there, visible, permanent. The neighbors started dropping by again. Mrs. Delaney brought over cornbread. Mr. Foster asked if she needed help with the gutters. Funny how people started acting different once they saw her name on the deed. Still, she kept to herself for a while. Regina encouraged her to file a complaint with the state bar about Conrad. Janelle agreed, but she didn't go out of her way to follow his case. She'd already seen enough of what greed did to people who should have known better. But the victory didn't feel hollow. It felt earned. One Saturday afternoon, Janelle stood in the backyard with a mug of coffee, watching the sun stretch across the grass. The wind carried the faint smell of honeysuckle. She felt something settle inside her, like her bones could finally rest. That evening she found a folder in Harold's desk labeled Letters Never Sent. Inside were a dozen pages, all addressed to her. Some were funny, some were rambling. One was half a page of just his thoughts about her future. What he hoped she'd find, what he feared she might carry. I know I didn't always say things the right way, but if there's one thing I hope you remember, it's this. You never had to earn your place with me. You already had it since the moment I met you. She read that line again and again. Later that night, she opened her laptop. She started drafting something she'd been thinking about for weeks. A foundation. The Harold Brooks Legacy Fund, to offer scholarships to adopted kids who aged out of the system or never got the support they deserved. Maybe it was small, but it felt right. She didn't want revenge, she wanted impact. And if Harold could raise a child he didn't create and still love her like his own blood, then maybe she could keep that spirit going, not out of obligation but out of memory. She paused at the end of the mission statement she was writing and added a line in bold. Family is not biology. Family is choice. And love is proof. But before she hit save, Janelle smiled to herself. Because even though they tried to shut her out, Harold had already let her in a long time ago. 3 months later, Janelle stood in front of a classroom full of teenagers at a local community center in Spartanburg. The topic of the day was identity. How we carry it, how others try to shape it, and what it really means to belong. She glanced around at the faces staring back at her. Some curious, some distracted, a few guarded in the way kids get when they've been let down too often. She put her hands in her pockets and said, "Let me tell you all a story about a man named Harold Brooks. He was a math teacher, liked quiet mornings, Sam Cooke, and he drank his coffee with too much sugar." They got a few smiles. "He adopted me when I was 9, but I didn't know it wasn't official until after he died. Or so I thought." She told them what happened. Not every detail, but enough. How someone she trusted tried to erase her. How paperwork had been hidden. How people told her she didn't belong. But my father never treated me like a maybe, she said. He showed up every single day. And when I finally found the truth, it wasn't in what other people said. It was in what he left behind. In his words, in his choices, in the way he made sure I had everything I needed even after he was gone. The room was still now. A boy in the second row raised his hand. So, did you forgive them? The ones that lied? Janelle paused, then said, I let go. That's not the same as forgiving, not exactly. Some things don't deserve to be excused. But I wasn't going to carry that weight. It didn't belong to me. She looked at them, these kids with their crossed arms and restless eyes. Most of them had been through things even adults couldn't imagine. Some had bounced through group homes, others had never heard the words, I'm proud of you, from someone who meant it. You don't have to have the same last name to be family, she said. And just because someone shares your blood doesn't mean they see you. She let that hang in the air. Sometimes the most radical thing you can do, she continued, is believe that you matter before anybody else does. One girl nodded slowly. Another whispered something to her neighbor. That was enough. That evening, Janelle walked home through the center of town. She passed the bakery where Harold used to buy her lemon cookies on Saturdays. He paused, walked in and bought two. Sat on the bench outside and ate one while the sun dipped low. The second cookie she wrapped carefully and placed in her purse. She'd leave it at his headstone tomorrow. Every week she brought him something. A note, a photo, one time just a drawing one of the kids had made with his name on it. He wasn't gone, not really. He was in every quiet act of love, every decision she made that centered kindness, every time she told a kid, you've got worth whether they see it or not. That was his legacy. Not the land, not the money. Before she went to bed, she opened the foundation website again and updated the homepage. Under the title, The Harold Brooks Legacy Fund, she added a quote. You don't become family by proving it. You become family by living it. She stared at it for a second, then hit save. To anyone on the outside, it looked like Janelle Brooks had just inherited a house. But what she really reclaimed was a history that had tried to leave her behind, and a future she now got to shape. She turned off the lamp, closed her eyes, and for the first time in a long while, slept through the night without waking up. Because sometimes justice doesn't look like a courtroom. It looks like healing, action, and knowing exactly who you are. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to be reminded that their value isn't up for debate. And if you haven't already, subscribe. More stories like this are coming soon.